From 16 years old to 41, you were in there,
Yeah.
incarcerated. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I lost both my parents while I was there. That was traumatic for me. I had no contact with my daughter until after my mother passed away. By that time, she was 17. And my brother just barely communicated with me. So I did it by myself, really. And as the years kept rolling by, it was just like I was losing that hope that I would ever get out because there were so many others around me that had been there 15, 20, 25 years and they're still sitting there. And I kept thinking to myself, geez, is that going to be me? Am I going to be here 30 years from now, still waiting for them to decide I'm, a good parole risk? And it took me a long time to figure out that they're not going to rehabilitate me. Rehabilitation is a choice. But the first step to doing that is to figure out what's wrong with you. What's wrong with the way you think? What's wrong with the way you behave that makes you have to be here? So I sat for a lot of years and I thought a lot about my life in the streets, the decisions I made, the people I hurt. And the older I got, the more I had to learn about self-forgiveness because that was my biggest issue. I couldn't forgive myself. I couldn't move forward because I was holding on to so much, childhood trauma, bitterness from relationships that were broken or didn't happen, the loss of my dad, who was my pillar. He was my rock, and my mom dying and not getting closure. There was so much that I held on to, and it was interfering with my ability to make better decisions for myself. So I had to work on that, and that was hard. It was emotional, and it was deep, and it was not something I was used to doing. And it took me years to reach a point where I was able to say, you know what? I'm going to be a better person. I'm going to get out of here, and I'm going to build a better life for myself. But the first thing I would do is make a better me. And I'm going to work on myself and take care of everything I need to do for me to be the person I need to be to step out of here. And I started going to programs, and I went to school, and I got a college degree, and I got my GED, and I started doing, just different programs and working hard to better myself. And one day I looked up and I was ready. I jumped through all the hoops, did everything that was asked of me, built upon myself, got my education, and I armed myself with the things that I needed to build a better life for myself once I was released.
Wow.
Yeah.
My guest last week, Nathan Widener, his daughter was murdered by somebody, and he was able to forgive him.
Wow.
And I told him about this expression I heard years ago. Forgiveness is setting a prisoner free and realizing you were the prisoner. And that just rings so true with your situation because not only were you physically incarcerated, but you were incarcerated emotionally and mentally as well because you wouldn't forgive yourself.
Yeah.
You can't go forward until you
can't.
deal with that kind of trauma and unforgiveness.
And you really can't. You're going to make me cry because, you really can't. If you're holding yourself prisoner with all of that baggage, let's just call it that because that's what it is. You carry it around with you everywhere you go. You got to let it go. And the only way you can let that go is to forgive yourself. And forgiveness is always about you. It's always about you. It's never about other people. It's about you. It's about you letting go of what's holding you hostage. And if you can't do that, you'll never forgive anybody truly, including yourself. You have to let it go. And it took me a long time and therapy. I'm not going to lie. I had to go through therapy. And that struck me hard when my mother passed away. That's when I had to get the therapy because I was already holding so much. And I was already going through so much. So the therapy was essential. It had to happen. And I wasn't ashamed, but I needed to do it for me. not for her,
Right.
or not for other people, not for the parole board, not for the warden. I had to do it for me, because if I was ever going to be where I wanted to be in life, I was going to have to do that and get rid of that baggage. And that's what I did. And it was hard. That was probably one of the hardest things I did while I was incarcerated.
Forgiving yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Didn't you have a couple suicide attempts while you were in there too?
Yeah, I did. And I escaped twice from the facility. So I made my time there very hard for myself, being unforgiving of me. And a lot of that comes from not knowing how to even start. I didn't even know how to start. I didn't know anything about forgiving myself. I was too busy focused on being bitter and mad at people that did bad things to me. I didn't know anything about forgiveness, and I couldn't forgive them because I couldn't even forgive myself, which is a God thing, because I'm telling you, God was there for me more than I was for myself. He was there for me when I couldn't be there for myself. And sitting and looking back on that, it's like my relationship with him was just as damaged. And I had to fix that too. So I did a lot of fixing, a lot of forgiving, a lot of thinking, a lot of deep digging. Because when you really start looking at yourself, you don't have time to think about other people. You really don't. Because if not all, a greater percentage of incarcerated people are carrying around that same baggage. They're still carrying it. And they may be doing a short sentence and get out, but they'll be back.
Right.
Because they're still carrying it.
Well, yeah, and a lot of people blame other people for their situation, and when you do that, you're taking away your own ability to change it.
Yeah. But it's easier. It's easier to do that.
Right.
It's easier to blame other people. I did that for most of my childhood, most of my teen years. The rest of my teens, all of my 20s, my situation was everybody else's fault but my own. And it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
When I was old enough to make a decision, I made a bad decision, and that was my fault, not somebody else's. Did other people contribute to that bad decision? Absolutely. But that doesn't make it their fault. Right. So you just have to dig deep enough, know what you're looking for, and be able to face it. Because if you can't face your own garbage, you're going to need a whole lot more than just self-reflection.